Hello, guys, and welcome back to another edition of Casual Word and Casual Word Radio. I'm your host, Langley, and today we're starting our pastor series. You guys have been following me on social media. Know that I've been talking about this for some time now. God kind of gave me this vision, and because of the pandemic and COVID, things that we've been experiencing, it's been a lot hard to get guests on the show. But now that life is returning back to some sense of normalcy, I thought it was a good time for us to go ahead and kick this off. And I'm very, very excited to have Joel Kirk from Real Life Church here. Joel, thank you for being here, sir.
Yes, sir.
It's going to be exciting. I think we're going to learn a lot about life, about the life of leadership in the church, and about just how we can all overcome. You guys know that this show is about overcoming adversity. It's about realizing that you're not the only person going through something, and that you have people who can help you and that you can lean on, and that you don't have to go through anything alone. So with that, guys, again, this is our pastor series. It's the first episode of this pastor series. And again, we've got Joel Kirk from Real Life Church. And really, Joel, I want to kind of kick off with, you're young. How old are you?
40.
40. Yeah. So I know 40 is a new 30, and
Right.
I'm 36. But still, in terms of clergy or leadership, it is a young age.
Yeah.
So when did you get started, or when did you know that this was going to be your calling? But when did you take it seriously to the point where you wanted to pursue this?
Well, first, let me say thank you for letting me be the inaugural interview, right? This is really cool. I get to be the first. So, I grew up a pastor's kid, grew up in the church. I'd never heard anything but church music. I was 8 years old at a Pizza Inn on a field trip to school before I ever heard secular music before, right? So, the church has just been what has been built into me. And so I grew up, became a musician loosely, and, got some opportunities to be a worship leader, led worship at some camps, and then eventually started working at some churches. But the whole time, by the way, I've been married for 18 years now, coming up in a few weeks.
Man, congratulations. That's hard, guys. We talked about relationships, and I posted something earlier about, that love doesn't equal being mistreated. So hats off to you guys for maintaining a strong relationship. I know I've been to some of your services. I've seen them. I know you guys said, you've had your ups and downs like anybody would, but to be able to stick it in and stay true and to each other and keeping God first, I'm sure helps, you guys stay vigilant and staying together.
Well, the whole time as a worship leader, I'm telling my wife, I believe there's more that I'm supposed to do. And I knew it. I knew there was this calling to serve God in a way that was bigger than me, and not just serving my own desires. Because let's be honest, in a lot of new churches nowadays, you got big sound systems and lights, and you step out on a church stage, and it can be awesome.
It's a concert,
and I love that, and our church is like that. But I just always felt there was something more. And I remember this older lady at our church in Knoxville. I would speak as a worship leader while I was singing. I would talk between songs or whatever. She kept saying, "Baby boy, you gonna preach one day." And I'm like, "No, ma'am, no, I'm not." And it wasn't until I moved back here in 2014, I found myself in need of a ministry called Celebrate Recovery for an addiction to pornography that had been years and years and years. And I had been a part of Celebrate Recovery before as a worship leader, but never as a broken person needing help. And so,
I mean, cut you off. I do want to make a point about that, guys. There are a lot of churches who have Celebrate Recovery ministries. And I think it's important to mention, just like what Joel was saying, that it's not just about substance abuse.
Right.
Okay.
I thought that.
Yeah.
Always.
That's I think that's a big misconception, is that, oh, well, I don't do drugs or I don't drink. Well, a lot of people have a lot of issues that transcend just having a physical dependency to something. So because if you're really struggling with something and you think you need, professional, semi-professional help, you need to bring Christ in to that too, because I can speak from experience. There's times when I needed Christian guidance, and there was times when I really needed professional help. And I think this is a good starting place, whatever you're struggling with. So just want to throw it out there, guys. Celebrate Recovery Ministries are not just about drugs and alcohol.
Well, and for me, I wanted to be healed of this in isolation. but I had to bring it into the light. I had to bring it into public. So I met a guy there named Ed. Ed's one of my leaders at my church now. He's an older gentleman, been in ministry for 30 or 40 years. And I'm getting to how I started getting serious about it and how where we're at now. Once again, I started leading worship even while I was a part of Celebrate Recovery. I started leading worship there, and I would speak in between songs. And Ed came up to me one day and he said, man, he said, whenever you speak to my heart. And he's like, I've been in ministry for 30 years and not many people do what stir in me what you stir. But then he said, but I got a question for you. He said, every time you pray, you ask God to settle your restless heart. He said, have you ever asked God why your heart's so restless? And I was like, no. And he said, well, is it possible that you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing? And so a whole nother story out of that. And that kind of led us to where we are now. And my wife and I decided almost 3 years ago to start a church with 20 people at a coffee shop. And we wanted to start a church. And in my last interview that I did, I said I started a church for all the fat people. That's kind of true. But, we wanted to start a church for all the last people. You remember what it was like in school being picked last for everything?
Yes, sir.
Well, there's a lot of people in church like that. Mm-hmm. They're the last to be picked for everything. Maybe it's issues that they've had that has sidelined them. Maybe it's, addictions or whatever it is. They're sidelined and they're last. And people look at them and go, no, we can do better, right? So we started a church for those people because I believe in that brokenness, God can bring so much beauty and then he gets the glory. I'm not educated as a pastor. Okay. I don't hold degrees in theology or anything like that. I went to college for a semester and God's getting glory. Every time a life gets changed, every time a family's way rearranges because they've encountered Jesus at Real Life Church, that's God qualifying me and my team.
Completely.
And so, here we are, and it's amazing when God tells you to do something, just do it. Just go.
Absolutely. And it's funny because just this morning, I posted that video about relationships and love. That hit me at about 2:00 this morning. And so I'm laying there. I'm like, oh, God, okay. I rolled over and I was taking notes. And I was like, okay, I'm writing all this stuff down. I'll do it first thing in the morning. It was not happening. I lay there for about another 20 minutes. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get up and go ahead and just do the video now. And it was interesting. I was talking to Joseph Broadwater, who has also been on this show, a good friend of mine, working on starting a church movement of his own. And he had mentioned that, someone at that hour needed to hear that. And sure enough, as I was thinking about that, 2 people watched it live at 2:30 this morning. So it goes back to something that we talk about you are also responsible for the people that you don't touch because you're being disobedient. And I never want to have to deal with that. That's consequences or that on my conscience. But I digress. That's just interesting that you say, when God calls you something, you need to do it. But something that you said really stuck out to me. And I wanted to ask you, what is your position, or how do you navigate propelling someone in the midst of brokenness and issue? Like you said, when you were dealing with Celebrate Recovery, you were still being elevated in the midst of going through something. And I think that what I've seen, I think a lot of people have experienced is, when you're dealing with an issue, or if you have a vice of some sort, something that's really hindering you on a personal level, you see that they're picked last. They don't get to help, and they don't get to be a part of something, even if they have a heart and a desire to do so because of whatever they're dealing with. The church is like, no, we'll wait till you get right, quote unquote. So how do you address that?
Well, I think there are times when you take a break for yourself and for whatever situation you're in. For me, I did that while I was starting Celebrate Recovery. I had gotten to the point where I couldn't get on stage anymore. I just felt like such a hypocrite. I left full-time ministry, left the church for a while, and mainly because I was like, I'm living a lie, and it was tough. And so I think there's times when the church doesn't handle it right. They make you step down because they don't want to get tarnished,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of gloss over it. But I think if the heart is right, there are times when we need to take a break for a minute. Not even, I tell you what, my pastor in Knoxville was going through a divorce, and we were planting a church in the United Methodist Conference. And I'm not United Methodist by any means, but he was my best friend. I was helping him. And one of the coolest things that I ever saw United Methodist do is when he was in the heat of this divorce, while he did step back from the pulpit, they didn't stop paying him. They gave him 6 months still taking care of him and his family while he tried to work through this. And I've never seen, usually what happens is you get fired. Yeah. If you're in ministry, you get fired because you're going through something. And I thought, that's beautiful, because what they were doing was helping him, making sure he could pay his bills and feed his family, all to restore him. See, I think a lot of times when we go through things, the heart of making us take the break is not to restore us. It's to not get tarnished ourselves.
Sure.
Sure. And so, I think there's a balance there. And I think I've been through enough where I have seen both sides of it. Mm-hmm. And what we try to do at Real Life Church is go, look, you're messy. Life is messy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's a God who loves us, and there's a God who's called. I mean, look at all the messy people in the Bible. Yeah. Think about it this way. I don't have any kids. Do you have kids? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, daughter or boy?
One of each.
Okay, one of each. So when your little girl was 2 years old or a year old, and she would mess in her diaper in her crib, and I'm just imagining it could probably get pretty messy, right? Sure. Well, when you went in there, did you just start yelling at her and like, what have you done? I can't believe you did this. No, you went in there and you picked her up and you cleaned her off. And once you got her cleaned off, then you went to her mess in her bed and you cleaned it up. And the truth is you probably got some on you at some point, right? Because it's messy dealing with that. Well, that's like what we're doing with people's lives. Yeah. We need to pick them up out if they're willing. Now, there's some people who are not willing to be picked up out of their mess, right? So let's just talk about the people who are. Mm-hmm. Let's go in. Let's pick them up out of the mess. Let's get them cleaned off. Then let's go clean their mess up. And we're going to get tarnished, and we're going to get some of it on us, and we're going to have to go take a shower and get cleaned up ourselves. But this is how we're trying to do church, Yeah.
Oh, and that's a beautiful analogy, because that's the essence of what being Christ-like is all about, right? Is, we're here to help one another and to serve one another. And I think that, a lot of times you get that stigma that, because you're messy, you can't be involved in a congregation or step into ministry or whatever that calling is on your heart, when it's exactly the opposite.
Well, I don't have to worry about anybody tarnishing us. Just take one look at me and you're going to get tarnished for coming to Real Life Church.
I tell you, in visiting your church long before you and I got a chance to meet, it was the transparency and the realness that what I really found to be attractive and worthwhile about coming back, because I've been part of churches who didn't want to have anything be aired. They didn't want to have things going on. And I feel like that does the people a disservice, because we are all human beings, right? We're all going through stuff.
Absolutely.
And I think that when you can be transparent, of course, to a degree, you don't put all your personal business out, but I think that when you can be transparent, especially from a place of leadership, that gives more confidence to your flock to say, hey, if he's going through stuff, I'm going through stuff, he's still doing that, I can make it too. And I think that what you guys are doing in terms of still helping someone move into their calling, I think a lot of times we human beings make situations better by shunning a person rather than still giving them an opportunity. Yeah. And I think the church is notorious for that in a lot of cases, is saying, well, you're messy, so you're not ready yet. Well, maybe if you give them an opportunity, give them some responsibility, give them something to do that is a desire of their heart, and then you help coach them and bring them along and mentor them, that mess may clean itself up a lot faster than just turning them loose and letting them figure it out on their own.
Right. Absolutely.
So I think it's just terrific. What is one of the biggest obstacles, again, young being relative, what are some of the biggest obstacles that you have encountered dealing with ministry and particularly as a leader of now your own church?
This is going to tell on myself and some of my founding leaders that helped me. But honestly, our biggest obstacle has been a lack of faith.
Really?
It has paralyzed us at times and made us just absolutely afraid to move forward.
Really?
And that has probably been the biggest obstacle. I mean, I can tell you story after story of how God provided. And I mean, look at the children of Israel. If you grew up in church and you know about the mass exodus from Egypt, God's moving, God's providing, God's doing all these incredible things. And then all of a sudden they get to where they're supposed to go and they start looking at all the obstacles. Well, this happened with us. We are now back on an upward trend because our faith has gotten reignited.
Okay.
We were accomplishing pretty incredible things, I believe, for a church of 50 when we first purchased that. When we purchased the city block that we're on right now to eventually one day see a community center come to life, we were running 50 or 60 people. And we said, we're going to purchase this city block, right? And we did. And God did some incredible things. Well, then we started running into some issues with the property, and that just sidelined us for a little while because we didn't have the faith that we could go forward. And here's what we've learned. And here's what I have learned. God's never going to give us what we need until we need it.
Ooh, that's power right there.
We kept waiting. I'm going to give you an example. We've been doing this for almost 3 years. We've hit 200 in attendance. And people had been telling me, when you start a church, man, you've got to get to 200 as fast as possible. If you're going to survive, if you're going to be able to do any good, you got to get to 200 people, because 200 people cooperatively giving and everybody going towards the vision makes something self-sustainable, right? Well, we've never been self-sustainable. God has been providing for us, right? Well, we would hit 200 and we'd drop back down. And last September, we went a little over 200 people and then just went on this downward spiral. And then the pandemic came. And it's hard enough for a church plant to survive, especially without a planting church, without a pandemic, right? So we start going through the pandemic and God provided like crazy in that. And we kept talking about 2 services one day. Man, we're going to have to go to 2 services. And we were waiting on this magic number of 200 people. We're not going to go to 2 services until we're running 200. Well, finally, man, the Holy Spirit just told me one night, go to your leadership and tell them we need to go to 2 services. Will you go with me? Dude, we started 2 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, we were running about 150 to 160. This past Sunday, we had 270 people. So wow. God didn't just give us it was almost like God's like, I'm not going to let you reach this goal until you do what I tell you, until you take the step of faith, right? So we took that step of faith, and God goes, I'm going to put you at almost 300.
That's it. That's by our obedience, guys. I talk about that all the time. You hear me say that all the time. It's so true because.
And see, if we would have hit 200 first before, and we made some other decisions before we went to 2 services, there were a couple other major decisions we were waiting. If we would have reached 200 first, we would have thought that 200 made it possible to do these things.
Good point.
And God's going, I'm not going to let you get there because you need to know that I did it.
That's it.
And so anyway, sorry. I didn't
get on
that.
That's beautiful, because that's, that is when you stretch your faith, God is always going to do exceeding abundantly. Every single time, guys.
We can imagine.
And we can't stress that enough. And it's not just because we're sitting here having the topic of leadership, guys. Those of you who have followed me from the beginning, you have seen amazing things happen in my life. And it's stepping out on faith. People ask me all the time, how are you here? How are you there? How are you still doing this? And it's just because, and I don't always have the faith. There's a lot of times where I'm like, no. This is not going to work out, or I'm just flat out, God and I are having a conversation. I'm like, I don't think this is going to work, God.
It's never going to make sense.
It never, guys. That's a beautiful point, guys. because his ways are not like our ways and his thoughts are not like our thoughts, it is never going to make sense to us. And that's why it's called faith.
Well, in faith, and this is, I don't care if it's an organization, I don't care if it's your personal life. Faith is not easy, but it is essential to growth.
Completely. Well, I think that's a great stopping point, guys. There's so much more we could talk about, of course, but like he said, it's not easy, but it is essential. So real quick, I want to thank Joel again for coming on and kicking this off. I'm looking forward to more guests. We'll probably have him come back on. But Joel, real quick, I want you to let everybody know how they can get in touch with you or your church, what your services are. Just going to give us the spiel there.
Absolutely. So, we can be reached on Facebook at Real Life Bristol. There's a lot of Real Life churches out there. So I put a geographical location on all of our web presence. So it's Real Life Bristol. You search for Real Life Bristol, you're going to find us. Also reallifebristol.com, Real Life Bristol on Facebook.com. But also I want to shout out to Until Love Runs This Town. UntilLoveRunsThisTown.com is a website that we have started as a church, but we have really taken our church completely out of it. So it's its own ministry, it's its own identity. We manage it, but we have a church partnering with us in Pennsylvania already that's doing Until Love Runs This Town. And so we're hoping that this will be a movement, hashtag Until Love Runs This Town, that people will utilize this web presence to tell the stories of how love has changed their lives or how they've used love to change someone else.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful, guys. So guys, you can find all that on social media, hashtag Till Love Runs This Town. I think it's a good thing. I've got the t-shirts.
Nice.
I got the cards. I've got, the stickers. I'm behind this 100%. And you guys said you're at 2 services now. What kind of your services?
Thank you. My media guy is going to be, he has a list of everything that I'm supposed to talk about when I do these things. And he'll be like, you didn't say. So Stephen, thank you to Langley, 9:30 and 11:15 a.m.
Okay, and you guys are on Weaver Pike, correct?
1317 Weaver Pike.
1317 Weaver Pike, 9:30 and 11, guys. Come out and worship with Real Life Church. It's been a blast. I can tell you from experience, I've been there on multiple occasions. You will not be disappointed. Guys, so as always, you guys want to quickly remind you, devotional 60 Days of Casual Word is out and available on Amazon. You can find that. I'm working on a new book called Baby Daddy Changed the Narrative, kind of a spin-off of some of the things that we talked about in the devotional. You guys always know you can find me, like, share, subscribe, follow me on all social media platforms, Casual Word. As always, guys, let us continue to change the way that we think, so we change the way that we live. And until next time, stay blessed.
And this was good. That's awesome.